If we do this, no one will ever know. Those words, spoken so intimately that they still echo in my mind, have played on repeat ever since they first wrapped around me like a forbidden melody. My heart thudded loudly, and my breath became shallow. I understood, even then, that what we were considering was unconventional, perhaps even frowned upon by society, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Michael, who's 54, isn't just any man. He married my dear friend Linda 5 years ago, and to the world he is the picture of a perfect husband, strong, steady, and dependable. But to me, he has always been Michael, the man whose subtle gestures and kind attention made me feel acknowledged, without ever imposing or coercing me into anything I wasn't willing to explore. At first, our interactions were defined by a respectful distance, a quiet, unspoken tension simmering beneath the surface that neither of us dared to acknowledge openly. Over time, however, that distance began to shrink. Michael's glances grew more prolonged, and his words, once measured and polite, started to carry a weight and warmth that I couldn't ignore. I found myself wondering if the connection between us was deepening into something both dangerous and strangely beautiful, a secret shared by two consenting adults who longed for something outside their ordinary lives. That particular evening began just like any other summer night. Linda had left on a work trip, a routine occurrence by now, leaving the large, quiet house for just the two of us. The night was perfect, a gentle warmth in the air, a soft breeze that made the curtains dance as if they were privy to a secret. We sat down for dinner on the terrace, pasta served with a light, crisp wine, and a conversation filled with trivial details that masked the undercurrent of our thoughts. Every time I brushed a stray lock of hair behind my ear or reached for my glass, I sensed Michael's eyes lingering on me, not with any aggressive intent, but with a tender intensity that made my skin tingle. After dinner, Michael suggested we move into the living room for another glass of wine to unwind. "Just relax," he said in a tone that was both casual and inviting. I followed him inside, my pulse quickening, not out of fear, but out of anticipation, a shared willingness to explore the feelings that had been building between us over time. We sat on opposite ends of the couch at first, the television murmuring in the background as the silence between us grew charged with something unspoken. It was as if the very air around us vibrated with a secret that we both longed to acknowledge. Then, slowly and deliberately, Michael closed the gap between us. I felt the couch shift under his movement as he leaned in, his hand brushed gently against the small of my back. His touch was light, almost imperceptible, yet it sent a shiver of delight down my spine. In that moment, as his warm breath caressed my ear, he murmured softly, "If we do this, no one will ever know." His voice was steady and sincere, a statement made not from dominance, but from a shared promise. Time seemed to slow, my thoughts racing not with panic but with the thrill of a mutual understanding that this line we were about to cross was one we both chose willingly. I remember how conflicted I felt in that instant, torn between the allure of the forbidden and the ingrained sense of propriety I had grown up with. Yet, amid the swirl of emotions, there was clarity. Every sensation, every look exchanged between us, confirmed that this was a decision reached through open communication and mutual desire. I knew I was an adult, fully capable of choosing my own path, and Michael respected that. There was no force, no hidden agenda, only a longing for connection that defied the boundaries of conventional relationships. I found myself reminiscing about how our relationship had evolved over the past few months. It wasn't as though our feelings had burst forth suddenly, rather, they had been creeping in subtly. I recalled early summer, when I returned home after my second year of college with a heart full of hope and a mind brimming with dreams. Linda's work commitments kept her busy, leaving Michael and me to navigate the complexities of our shared household. In the beginning, our interactions were limited to polite greetings and small talk over dinner, always accompanied by the comforting hum of normalcy. But as days turned into weeks, those seemingly innocent moments began to take on a deeper significance. I started noticing the way Michael's gaze would fix on me when he thought I wasn't looking, or how his hand would linger a fraction longer than necessary when passing something across the table. At first, I wondered if it was just my imagination. Yet, with each passing day, the signals became clearer, a subtle smile here, a gentle touch there. It was as if both of us were silently agreeing to acknowledge a growing attraction without shattering the delicate balance that had defined our relationship for so long. One afternoon, shortly after I'd returned from college, circumstances conspired to create an intimacy that felt both natural and inevitable. Linda had to leave suddenly on a business trip, and with her departure, the house felt remarkably empty, devoid of the familiar warmth of her presence. That evening, as Michael and I sat down for dinner, I could sense the shift in the air. The conversation flowed easily, interspersed with laughter and shared glances that carried more meaning than words ever could. Michael's presence was comforting and safe, a steady force in a world that sometimes seemed too overwhelming. Yet, even amid the burgeoning closeness, I maintained a quiet awareness of the boundaries we had set. Our interactions, however charged, were always framed by mutual respect and consent. I never felt pressured or manipulated. Rather, I felt empowered by the fact that every step we took was a conscious choice, a delicate dance between two hearts equally willing to explore uncharted territory. As I sit here now, recalling that night on the terrace and the tender intimacy that followed, I understand that our secret was not one of exploitation or coercion, but of two people daring to seek solace in each other's company. It was a forbidden allure, yes, but one built on respect, genuine care, and an acknowledgement of each other's humanity. Michael's whispered words were not a threat, but a gentle promise of confidentiality, a commitment that what we shared was ours alone, a beautiful secret born out of consent and mutual understanding. The memory of that night remains vivid, its details etched into my mind like a delicate yet indelible imprint. It was a moment that redefined everything, a point of no return where the boundaries of conventionality blurred into something more authentic and raw. And as I continue to navigate the complexities of that connection, I know that every look, every whispered word, carries the weight of a choice made freely, a choice that, no matter how forbidden it might seem to outsiders, is grounded in the pure, unforced desire of two consenting souls. In the days that followed that unforgettable evening, life at home took on a surreal, dreamlike quality. Mornings arrived quietly, with the house still steeped in the lingering hush of a secret unspoken. I found myself both exhilarated and apprehensive, caught between the thrill of our newfound intimacy and the weight of the choices I had made. Michael and I continued our routines as if nothing had shifted on the surface, yet every shared glance, every accidental touch, spoke of a deeper connection simmering beneath the veneer of everyday life. One late afternoon, when the sunlight filtered softly through the living room window, I decided to step outside for a walk. The summer heat pressed gently against my skin, and with each step I took, I tried to piece together my thoughts. The gentle rustling of leaves, the distant murmur of neighborhood chatter, it all served as a backdrop to the internal dialogue that had become my constant companion. I recalled Michael's tender, steady gaze from that fateful night and the promise hidden in his whisper. I wondered if the thrill of our secret could sustain itself without being tainted by guilt or regret. I reassured myself that every choice we had made was born of mutual understanding, and that our connection, however unconventional, was not defined by coercion but by the power of consent and genuine desire. Back at home, the air seemed charged with anticipation. Michael was often in the study or the kitchen, moving about with a calm assurance that belied the intensity simmering just below the surface. Sometimes, as I passed by him, I caught the slight softening in his eyes, a look that suggested he too was wrestling with the magnitude of our situation. Our interactions were increasingly marked by unspoken communication. A shared smile while setting the table, the subtle adjustment of his posture when our eyes met, all these small moments felt like signals, reinforcing the bond we had chosen to cultivate. One evening, as twilight bled into the living room and cast long, intricate shadows on the walls, Michael invited me to join him for a quiet dinner at home. The table was set simply, with a vase of wildflowers and soft candlelight creating an ambience that was both intimate and soothing. Over a meal of roasted vegetables and tender chicken, we spoke about trivial things, college classes, mutual friends, and even the latest book I'd been reading, but each sentence was interwoven with moments of reflective silence. There was an unspoken acknowledgement between us that what we shared was fragile yet precious. Michael's gentle tone and considerate words filled the space, easing my apprehension and reaffirming that every step we took was carefully measured and freely chosen. After dinner, we moved to the living room where soft music played in the background. We sat together on the couch, maintaining a respectful distance yet feeling the magnetic pull that drew us closer with every passing minute. It wasn't a rush to erase the boundaries that had once defined our relationship. Rather, it was a gradual, mutual exploration of the emotions we both held. Michael reached out, not forcefully, but with a deliberate gentleness that made my heart flutter. His hand rested on mine, And in that tender gesture, I felt both comfort and the unspoken promise of understanding. I squeezed his hand in return, a silent affirmation that I, too, was ready to navigate this delicate territory together. Yet even in these moments of intimacy, I couldn't help but be mindful of the complexities surrounding us. I kept reminding myself that this was not a betrayal of any trust, but a careful, consensual choice between two adults. Every action was weighed with the understanding that our bond must be nurtured with respect and clear boundaries. It was not about domination or submission, it was about two souls connecting on a level that transcended the ordinary. As the evening deepened, the conversation turned reflective. Michael shared memories of his early days with Linda, a time filled with youthful hope and unspoken dreams. I listened intently, realizing that his life, too, was a tapestry woven with moments of quiet longing and gentle risk. In sharing his past, he allowed me a glimpse into the man I had come to know, a man capable of vulnerability, regret, and tenderness. I reciprocated with stories of my own struggles and triumphs, each anecdote a thread that gradually bound us closer in understanding. That night, as I lay awake afterward, I couldn't help but marvel at the complexity of emotions swirling within me. There was joy in the forbidden, an exhilarating freedom in knowing that I was making choices for myself, not out of coercion, but out of genuine desire and mutual respect. And while the future remained uncertain, in that moment I found solace in the knowledge that our secret was built on a foundation of shared consent, a promise that we would navigate the uncertain path together, with honesty and care. As the days turned into weeks, the rhythm of our secret encounters began to carve its own pattern into our lives. Mornings arrived quietly, and the shared glances between Michael and me held a promise that defied the ordinary routine of household life. Every subtle nod, every gentle smile, deepened the bond we had chosen, a bond that, despite its forbidden nature in the eyes of some, was built entirely on mutual respect and freely given consent. One crisp afternoon, when the summer air carried the scent of blooming flowers and distant laughter from neighbors at play, I found myself alone in the quiet of our spacious backyard. I sat on the old wooden bench, letting the warm sunlight drape over me as I pondered the complexity of my emotions. It wasn't that I felt guilt, rather, there was a heady mix of excitement and vulnerability. I was learning more about myself with every clandestine moment shared with Michael, and while uncertainty sometimes tugged at the edges of my thoughts, I also felt a liberating clarity about my choices. That day, as I lingered in a state of reflective solitude, Michael unexpectedly appeared at the garden door. He hesitated for a moment as if weighing whether to intrude on my private reverie, then approached with the familiar, calm confidence that had always set him apart. "Mind if I join you?" he asked softly. I nodded, and together we settled on the bench, the silence between us comfortable and laden with unspoken understanding. Michael began to talk, first of his own past, the challenges he'd overcome, and the life he had built after years of heartache and loss. His voice was gentle yet resonant, filled with memories of both regret and hope. I listened, enraptured by the vulnerability in his tone, and felt a kinship that transcended our circumstances. In turn, I shared pieces of my own journey, my struggles to define myself beyond the expectations placed upon me, the dreams I had nurtured despite life's relentless pressures. The conversation flowed naturally, each revelation drawing us closer and reaffirming that our connection was based on honesty and mutual sharing, not on manipulation or coercion. Later that evening, the entire house seemed to hold its breath. With Linda still away on one of her frequent work trips, the silence in the corridors became a canvas for our private world. Michael and I prepared a simple dinner together in the kitchen. The clink of dishes and the soft hum of the refrigerator underscored our movements as we worked side by side. There was an intimacy in the mundane, a subtle recognition that, for these moments, the outside world ceased to exist. We exchanged playful banter, laughter echoing in the quiet space, and every now and then our hands would brush lightly as we passed ingredients to one another. Each fleeting touch sent sparks of awareness through me, a constant reminder of the secret we nurtured with care. After dinner, as twilight faded into the gentle hues of dusk, Michael suggested we take a walk through the nearby park. Under a canopy of twinkling stars, we strolled slowly along winding paths, the cool night air wrapping around us like a soft shawl. Conversation was sparse, replaced by long, meaningful silences filled with shared glances and the steady rhythm of our footsteps. In that serene darkness, I began to understand that what we had was more than just a rebellious act, It was a discovery of love in a form that was unexpected yet deeply authentic. Yet, even as our connection deepened, the duality of our world weighed on my thoughts. There were moments when the reality of our situation would creep in, a fleeting worry about what others might say, or a quiet reflection on the risks we were taking. But every time doubt surfaced, Michael's reassuring touch or the earnest look in his eyes would dissolve my fears. We both knew that our relationship was defined not by external judgments, but by the sincerity of our emotions and the strength of our choices. There was no room for force, no hidden manipulations, only the unvarnished truth of two people who dared to be vulnerable. On one particularly reflective night, as the house lay enveloped in stillness, I sat in my room writing in a journal. I attempted to capture the essence of my inner turmoil and the beauty of what we were building together. My pen traced words of longing, of passion mingled with apprehension, and of a hopeful future that might arise from our courageous defiance of societal norms. I wrote about Michael's kindness, the way his presence calmed my racing heart, and the delicate balance of desire and respect that defined our every encounter. In these quiet hours, I realized that our secret was not just a series of stolen moments, it was a transformation. It was a metamorphosis of my identity, a journey toward understanding that the heart knows no bounds when it comes to love. And even as the specter of uncertainty lingered in the background, I felt a profound gratitude for the chance to experience such raw, unfiltered emotion. Every smile, every whispered word in the dark, affirmed that our choices, though unconventional, were entirely our own. As I closed my journal that night, the silence of the room echoed with the promise of a new day, a day where I would continue to embrace both the light and the shadows of my heart, confident that I was charting a path defined by genuine connection and unwavering respect. In the weeks that followed, the intensity of our secret connection continued to evolve in unexpected ways. Mornings were no longer just routine, they became a silent affirmation of a new reality I was learning to accept. Even as I went about my daily life, attending classes, catching up with friends, and managing my own aspirations, I found that every moment carried echoes of what Michael and I shared. There was a constant undercurrent of emotion, a subtle reminder that beneath the ordinary surface, something profound had awakened. One particularly clear afternoon, as I sat in a quiet corner of the campus library, my mind drifted back to those stolen evenings at home. The gentle clink of a coffee cup in the student lounge and the soft hum of conversation around me couldn't dispel the vivid memories of candlelit dinners and whispered secrets. I wondered how much of this was truly mine to own, and how much was simply a reflection of an inner yearning to break free from the confines of expectation. My feelings were tangled, a blend of exhilaration, guilt, and the bittersweet taste of forbidden desire, but they were also honest and unequivocally my own. That evening, when I returned to the quiet solitude of the house after a long day of lectures and library hours, I was greeted by a silence that felt both comforting and heavy. Michael was in the study, his figure illuminated by the soft glow of a desk lamp. He looked up as I entered, his eyes reflecting a warmth that immediately quelled the residual weariness of the day. Without saying a word, he motioned for me to sit beside him on the worn leather couch. There was an unspoken invitation in his gaze, a silent promise that I was safe to share my thoughts, my doubts, and my hopes. For a long while, we sat together in comfortable silence, the only sounds being the faint rustle of papers and the steady ticking of the old clock on the wall. Eventually, Michael broke the quiet with a gentle, reflective tone. "I've been thinking about us," he began, choosing his words carefully. "About how our connection has grown, and about the way we've learned to trust each other with our vulnerabilities." His voice was soft, yet every word resonated with sincerity. I listened intently, feeling as though I were being seen in a way that no one else had ever managed. I admitted, in halting phrases, that I too had been wrestling with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. "Sometimes I wonder if we're losing sight of who we are outside of these moments," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael's expression was one of understanding rather than reproach. "It's natural to question and to fear change," he replied. "But every choice we make, every step forward, is a part of discovering who we truly are." His words calmed the turbulent storm of my thoughts, and I realized that this journey was as much about self-discovery as it was about the forbidden allure of our relationship. In the days that followed that deep conversation, our interactions took on a more deliberate quality. We began to carve out time for honest, uninterrupted discussions, where we could talk about everything from our pasts and our dreams for the future to the complexities of living a life that defied societal expectations. Michael, with his calm and measured insights, often helped me see things from a perspective I had never considered. He was patient when I faltered, and his presence was both grounding and inspiring. I began to understand that our connection wasn't merely about the thrill of secrecy, it was about finding solace and truth in each other's company. Yet, as the reality of our situation deepened, so too did the challenges. There were days when the weight of our secret pressed down on me, particularly in moments when I was surrounded by friends who talked effortlessly about their lives, their futures, and the predictability of everyday choices. I felt as if I were living in two worlds at once, one where I was the confident, independent young woman pursuing her dreams, and another where I was entangled in a delicate, unconventional relationship that sometimes felt like a hidden shadow. One crisp evening, after a long day filled with the rigors of academic life, I decided to take a solitary walk along a familiar trail near campus. The cool air cleared my mind, and under the vast, starlit sky, I allowed myself to reflect on the paradox of our situation. There was a beauty in the risk we had embraced, a freedom in choosing to follow my heart despite the obstacles. And yet, the possibility of exposure, the inevitable clash between our private world and the expectations of those around us, weighed on me. I understood that while the thrill of our secret was intoxicating, it also demanded a careful balance of honesty, integrity, and self-respect. That night, when I returned home, I felt both relieved and anxious as I walked through the familiar corridors of the house. The quiet was interrupted only by the soft murmur of Michael's voice coming from the study. It was in these quiet moments that I realized our journey was far from simple. Each day was a test of my resolve, a challenge to reconcile the many layers of my identity. But as I settled in for the night, with the memory of Michael's reassuring touch lingering on my skin, I knew that no matter how complex the path ahead might be, I was determined to face it with the courage that had carried me this far. In the stillness of the night, as I lay awake listening to the rhythmic pulse of the house, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to explore a connection that, though unconventional, was built on mutual respect, understanding, and the freedom to choose one's own destiny. It was in those quiet, introspective hours that I began to see the true essence of our bond, a living testament to the power of love, trust, and the unyielding pursuit of one's authentic self. In the weeks that followed, the secret we shared began to reshape my inner world. I came to understand that every decision carried its own weight, and every hidden moment had the power to transform who I was. I realized that our journey, as unconventional as it was, had never been about coercion or exploitation. It was a mutual exploration of desires, fears, and hopes. Michael and I both chose this path freely, with full awareness of its complexities, and that truth grounded us even in the midst of uncertainty. One evening, after a day that had been filled with both joyful discoveries and quiet introspection, I sat by the window watching the city lights come to life. The distant hum of nighttime activity reminded me that life continued beyond our secret world, a world that now felt like both a refuge and a catalyst for change. I reflected on the many conversations we had shared, the tender confessions, the heartfelt laughter, and even the moments when silence spoke volumes. It was in those shared silences that I found the strength to embrace all the parts of me, even those that were considered forbidden by the outside world. Michael's steady presence had taught me that vulnerability was not a weakness but a bridge to genuine connection. I had learned that every shared glance, every whispered word, could be a step toward understanding not only another person but also my own heart. The boundaries of our relationship were not defined by external judgments but by the mutual respect that underpinned every encounter. Our connection was an intricate tapestry woven from trust, honesty, and a willingness to accept the fluid nature of love. As the summer waned and the long, bright days gave way to the cool promise of autumn, I recognized that the path ahead would not be free of challenges. Yet, with each passing day, I grew more certain of my own resilience and the importance of living in alignment with my true self. Whatever the future held, I knew that the lessons of that summer, of love chosen freely, and of the transformative power of consent, would remain with me forever. In the quiet aftermath of our shared journey, I found solace in the knowledge that the beauty of our connection was not diminished by its secrecy but enriched by the authenticity of our choices. And as I prepared to embrace whatever came next, I held on to the conviction that every heart has the right to seek its own truth, unburdened by fear or shame.